You can do this, and we are here to help. We can help you shape your testimony. We can answer questions. We can review this information again. So I just want you to leave here feeling like you can do it and it's not a big mystery. People are told all the time to talk to your legislators or get involved, but we wanted to make sure you know exactly how to do that. So we're going to review Maryland's legislative process, what stages a bill goes through to become a law, and we're going to talk about what points in that process you can actually get involved in, where your voice matters, where you're just playing a waiting game. And we're also going to review some tips on how to actually talk to your legislators, how to deliver a pitch effectively, relatively quickly, because legislators are busy people and you might only have a minute or two of their time. How to choose a good spokesperson, and also practical tips like how to actually navigate the MGA website, because it's not necessarily intuitive. So we'll be showing that as well.
Great. And it's this. So we're just going to do some housekeeping real quick. I'm going to do the first half of this, and David, if you can do the second half, just so folks know, right, because we're all whole human beings with lives behind the screen. My toddler just got home from preschool, so I'm just getting her settled in, but I'll do the first half and then David will do the second half. So housekeeping and ground rules. One, this training is being recorded. I meant to announce that at the beginning, but we are recording this training. Again, this is hosted by the Community Health Workers Empowerment Coalition of Maryland and the Doula Alliance of Maryland, which we'll talk about both coalitions for, after this slide. Second, this is a safe space for all identities and lived experiences. Whatever you're comfortable sharing with us in this space, especially during question and answer or in the chat, you know, we want to keep folks' information, especially if you post in the chat. We're not going to share that outside of this, but just keep in mind that this space is recorded. But otherwise, we honor all identities here, and you're free to share any information about yourself that you'd like. Next one is no isms or obias. And by that, I mean things like racism, sexism, transphobia, xenophobia, you name it, the bad things that we don't want in this space. If we hear it, if we see it, you will be booted from the training. I don't think that will happen in this space. We know that CHWs, doulas, and community members who are interested in this kind of advocacy, that we're all pretty much aligned when it comes to building safe spaces where everyone can feel free to express their identities and their lived experience. And David, can you cover the next three?
We want to emphasize that lived experience is expertise. You are the expert on your own story, and that expertise matters. So you don't need to be a professional or come with any background knowledge to this space. Your own experience is valuable. We are in a learning space, so we will hopefully have plenty of time at the end for questions and answers. There are no bad questions. Nobody is born knowing any of this. So it's a learning experience for everyone. And finally, we wanted to note about Public Justice Center and us as presenters. We have a focus on legislative advocacy and not electioneering as a 501c3. So what that means is we cannot endorse or talk about any specific candidates for office, but we can talk about what is good policy and how to advocate and how to be involved. So we're not going to be making any reference to specific political parties or candidates through this presentation, but there's still a lot of space for us to talk about politics here and how to be involved.
All right. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, so let's start by introducing the hosts of this awesome legislative training. First, the Doula Alliance of Maryland. I think we have Anna Rodney on the line. I saw some other members from the coalition. If folks wanted to chime in who are from the Doula Alliance of Maryland to share a bit about the group and how folks can connect with you.
So yes, I am here. Hi, everybody. My name is Anna Rodney. I am a doula, an advocate, a concerned community member, and so also one of the founding members of the Doula Alliance of Maryland. And so our group is a amalgamation of doulas, researchers, policy folks, advocates, midwives, shout out to McKnight, and other folks in the birthing landscape who are interested in making sure that our voice is at the table when there are policies and procedures that are being enacted on our behalf. And so wanting to make sure that not only our voice is represented, but we are disseminating information to the communities that we represent. And so our work has been primarily over the last couple of years around the Medicaid reimbursement, educating lawmakers, letting lawmakers know about what a doula is. You'd be surprised how many people don't know exactly what a doula is. But um, testifying and bringing awareness to legislation that will affect us as a group, our families, our community, and us as practitioners as well. And so we have also supported in drafting bills and testifying on bills in Annapolis and are continuing to do so. But we do have a pretty tight relationship. I don't want to misspeak, but we have a pretty in-depth relationship with MDH in which we are able to bring back feedback and information as they are working through what Medicaid reimbursement looks like. We are a policy group that is doula led and run. The advocates and those people who do not identify as birth workers do a great job at stepping back and giving us a guiding hand when we need it, when we ask for it. But the majority of the work and the majority of the work is being done by us, the doulas and the birth workers. So we have a listserv. We would love for you to join it. I can drop that in the chat. And we did just have a listening session, and we have some great things coming up in the new year. And so we would love for you to follow us on Instagram. You can find us Doula Alliance of Maryland, or DAM. And yeah, you can follow up with a number of us. So David is here, Ashley is here, I'm here, Melissa Rock is here, McNye is here, I believe Lauren is going to jump on, and Annie, or all. You could jump in our DMs in the chat if you would like. There is, Lauren just dropped the website, so please feel free to reach out to us and contact us so you can get involved.
Thank you so much, Anna. Yes, please get involved in this coalition. There's a lot going on in the doula space, and folks from the coalition, the doulas in particular, will fill you in on that. Okay, so next one, we're going to talk about the Community Health Workers Empowerment Coalition of Maryland. I can't see the participants because I'm in the share mode, but I don't know if there's folks from our coalition on the line that would like to chime in and share what we're about, but maybe David, you can give the overview of kind of what our coalition is and what we do.
Yeah, so you'd probably you can note a lot of parallels between this coalition and the Doula Coalition. Our goal with founding this coalition as Public Justice Center is to bring together community health workers and people who train them, educate them, support them, employ them, all the stakeholders in the community health worker space, to make sure that CHWs have a voice in policy that impacts them. So we started out with this coalition with the goal of pursuing Medicaid reimbursement and helping CHWs build sustainable careers. But once we actually started talking to CHWs and hearing more about what's going on in that profession, we've expanded our goals a lot. So we're also focused on things like making sure that community health workers are respected in their employment positions, that supervisors know how to deal with community health workers and how to appropriately use them. And to make sure that community health workers continue to have a voice in policy advocacy. We know there's a long history of powerful advocacy from CHWs before we got here. CHWs were instrumental in getting the licensing standards for CHWs implemented and guiding that process. So we hope to bring community health workers into legislation that impacts them on a continuing basis. And center the voices of community health workers. So that's why I'm glad that you're all here joining us this evening, because we want to hear from you and do the work that's going to be most meaningful and impactful for you all.
Thank you. And I just wanted to share with folks, this is because I see we've got already 42 people on. This is a great space for networking and sharing contacts, getting connected with each other. So just wanted to encourage people, drop your name. If you have an organization, if you have a business, drop it in the chat, let people know who you are, how to connect with you. If you have social media that you'd like people to connect with you on, share that too. We want to make sure that this is a space where people can connect, learn from each other, and do this advocacy together. Right, so let's go to our next one. So Public Justice Center. So we're the folks who are presenting for today. So we are a nonprofit law firm. We our slogan is so that we're pursuing systemic change to build a just society. So what does that mean? What we do is we use different legal tools. So direct representation, like litigation, filing lawsuits to help drive systemic change on unjust issues. We use administrative advocacy, policy advocacy, legislative advocacy to try to build a just society. And so that's the reason why we wanted to work with both of these coalitions to pull together a training like this, because legislative advocacy is a tool that can be really effective. It's a tool that can be really effective in getting changes relatively quickly. Legislative session is 90 days. So from start to finish, you can see a bill that's just a proposal on something that a legislator has put forward to change the law suddenly become law. And that's really exciting. So we want people who haven't been involved in that space to be involved. And that's why we wanted to contribute to providing that training for folks. It was also a big request from our CHW coalition that really wanted to learn how to do legislative advocacy. And I just wanted to flag, doulas, CHWs, you're all very natural advocates because you advocate for the people that you provide services to and that you care to. So there's also some links embedded in here on the different legal issue areas that we work on. We work on housing, workers' rights, education. We have a national project that works on civil right to counsel in different settings, prisoners' rights, appellate advocacy. And I see that our project is missing, so I need to add that to the slide, but the health and benefits equity team. So you can click any of these links to learn more about the different things that we're working on. All right, David, did you want to do this one?
Yeah, and I would just throw out for the PJC, I know that doulas and community health workers alike are always looking for resources to help their clients out. So we provide a lot of assistance, and if we can't help, then we can find somebody that can. So feel free to reach out to us on a variety of issues. We're happy to help. So for this evening, I wanted to talk about why legislative advocacy is so important. We together have the power to change the position of people in power and can impact the law. It's not enough for experts like Ashley and myself to show up. The reason that legislators listen to Public Justice Center and how we've built our reputation and our success is by working with impacted people. So we have the numbers behind us, and we are drawing on the lived experience of people who are impacted by this policy. So it's not just a nice thing to do to listen to people who are impacted by the policy. It's key to getting things right. Community health workers advocated when the licensing standards were being created, and it was advocacy from community health workers that kept background checks out of the licensing standards and made sure that the profession was accessible to everybody. This is something that legislators weren't considering. It took the perspective of people who would be living the work to make that happen. And a lot of the doulas could chime in as well, that we've been working with MDH to make Medicaid reimbursement more accessible, and the programs will only work well and actually meet the needs of people that we serve if they're properly designed. So our goal as an organization is to reduce racial inequality, to end disparities in healthcare, help everybody succeed. And in order to do that, we need to create policy that's created with these people in mind. So it's an essential part of our strategy to be listening to you all and to hear directly from the people that are impacted by this policy. You're on mute, Ashley.
Thank you. I'll never not do that. So now we're going to jump into the core of this training. How does the legislative process work, and where are the points where we can intervene in this to make change, to affect change? So This is a flow chart, a lovely flow chart that we made to explain the legislative process. There's actually one on the Maryland General Assembly. So that's what Maryland's legislature is called. It's the Maryland General Assembly. There's a flow chart on their website as well that describes the legislative process, but it leaves out some key steps that we really wanted to dig into here by adding them to this chart. So the first thing that you need to know is that in Maryland, we have a House and a Senate. They're referred to as chambers. And so we've got Senate, it's its own chamber, House, it's its own chamber. So what happens is when a bill is introduced, and only legislators can introduce bills, there are times where the governor's office requests that the legislature introduce a bill for him, and it'll still have a legislator assigned to that, where it might be like the chair of the committee that the bill is introduced in front of. And I'll talk about what committees are in a second. You may also have a state agency that asks a legislator to introduce a bill on their behalf because there's something that they're like, oh gosh, we really need to get this done this year so that we can continue doing, X job. And you'll still see that there's a bill sponsor for it. So that's what legislators, when they're introducing a bill, they're considered the bill sponsor. And there can be more than one bill sponsor. So you'll see times where you have multiple legislators' last names listed on a bill, and that's because they're co-sponsoring. But there's usually a lead sponsor, and that's the person who's listed first. So what happens is when a bill is introduced, there's what's called a first reading in the chamber. So it's read on the House or Senate floor, whichever one it's in. There are times where the same bill can be filed in both the House and Senate. And the strategic reason to do that is to give your bill 2 opportunities to get across the finish line. So getting like 2 bites at the apple, because you get a House hearing and a Senate hearing instead of a House hearing and a Senate hearing, and then the bill would cross over to have a hearing in the opposite sides as well. So I'll talk more about that in this chart, but that's the first step. It gets read on the House or Senate floor. And from there, it gets referred to a committee. Now, in Maryland, the House and Senate have committees for each, for their chambers, and those committees deal with specific subjects. So in the space that we're talking about now, so community health workers and doulas, typically you're going to see legislation that impacts your professions or the healthcare space in general go through the House Health and Government Operations Committee. So that's the committee that handles a lot of the healthcare related bills. They handle some bills on public benefits, but those usually go to a different committee. So they usually handle the healthcare ones. And then on the Senate side, it would be the Senate Finance Committee or the Senate, I always get this wrong, it's called Triple-E. It's Education, Environment, and oh my gosh, I'm gonna miss the other E. David, if you get a second, if you can look up what the Triple-E committee stands for. Having a little bit of brain fog today, but there's another committee over there that bills may go to that impact either profession. It just depends on whether what the content of the bill is. So each of those committees, to make this even more complicated, each of those committees has subcommittees. And those subcommittees, what their role is they're even more niche. So for example, the House Health and Government Operations Committee has a subcommittee called Minority Health and Health Disparities. So they're only taking bills that touch on that issue area. There's also like a pharmaceutical subcommittee that only takes the bills that touch on pharmaceuticals and medications and prescription drug affordability in Maryland. So the reason a bill would go to a subcommittee is if after the hearing for that bill in the main committee, the committee, let's say they decide, okay, this bill we think this is good. There's a couple issues with it that we really need to work on. We need to change some of the language in it. Typically what they do is send that bill to a subcommittee to be worked on, the subcommittee for that subject area. And it's legislators from the committee, it's a couple of them, and then one of them is the chair of that subcommittee. And they usually invite stakeholders, so people who've weighed in on the bill publicly. Typically they'll invite them to be part of the subcommittee to help, rework the language for the bill. And then when they're done with it, it goes back to the main committee for a vote on whether or not they're going to pass it or just let it sit. And if a bill sits and it doesn't meet the milestones it needs to meet, then it dies, and you try again the next year. So after that step, let's say the committee has voted on the bill and they're like, we like this bill, and it's called a favorable vote. So they vote it favorably out of the committee. It then goes down to the House or Senate floor, whichever chamber it's in, and it goes for what are called readers. So first, second, and third reader. That first reader was that first step that I just described up here. Second reader and third reader, it's basically they announce the bill again. They allow for a floor debate on the bill. So if there are legislators that really like the bill or ones that are very opposed to it, they may request from the Senate president or the House Speaker, those are the leaders of the House and Senate, to allow them to speak, and say a few words to try to encourage their colleagues to vote the way that they want to vote. So if they're saying, I really don't like this bill, I urge you all to vote against it. That's what they can use first and second and third reader to do. So if the bill gets enough votes, gets the majority of votes in the House or Senate floor after second and third reader, it then crosses over to the opposite side. So if it started in the House, now it goes to the Senate, and vice versa. If you have a bill that's been an identical bill that's been filed in both the House and Senate, it's going to cross over, even though it already was in that chamber, because sometimes they've made different changes to the bill. So you may see that a bill that's been what's called cross-filed is what I'm describing, comes out of the House, comes out of the Senate with very different language, and it crosses over and the House gets it and they're like, this isn't what we passed, so let's review it. And there's another opportunity for a brand new hearing where they're going to hear that bill and decide what they want to do with it. And there are times where that bill, so it goes through the same process again that it went through in the first chamber, where it goes to a committee, it might go to a subcommittee, gets voted on, and then goes back down to the House or Senate floor. Now, what I'm going to describe is it's a little complicated, but hear me out. So let's say a bill passes the House and Senate and it gets down to their floors, it's crossed over and it's made it down to both floors and is in the position where it's going to pass and then go to the governor's desk. If those two bills, so if it's a cross-filed bill where it's the same bill, but it's been changed in both chambers, if those two bills don't look the same, then what they do is they have what's called a conference committee. That's where legislators from the House and then a few from the Senate come together for a meeting to work out the differences in the two bills that are supposed to be identical. And in that process, sometimes that's where changes might be made that, where advocates are like, oh gosh, the House passed a better version of this bill than the Senate did. We need to advocate to the House that, when you have that conference committee, please advocate to protect the good stuff that we got in the bill on your side. If they can't reach a decision by the deadline, which is called sine die, it's the last day of session to send things to the governor's desk to be signed into law, then the bill will die. If they do reach a decision and they're able to reconcile the differences and they agree with each other, it's going to go to the governor's desk to be signed into law. So that's the whole legislative process in Maryland. It's similar on the federal level too, but this is how we do it here. All right. And okay, so I'm just going to cover a couple key dates for the legislative session that you'll want to keep on your radar. As you're, if you find bills that you're interested in that you want to work on, you want to keep these dates on your radar so that you don't miss things. Key moments where you can intervene and advocate. So the first one is January 17th. So that just passed. That is the date that the House and Senate have to put in their request for a bill to be drafted in order to get a hearing, in order to get a priority date hearing. February 3rd, so that's coming up. That's the final day that in the Senate, a bill can be introduced. February 7th is technically the final day that a bill can be introduced in the House. So if you're working with a legislator on a bill, you want to make sure that, they get busy, they're working on a lot of things. You may want to check in with them just to say, hey, we've been working with you on this bill. The legislative session has started. Has it been filed yet? Have you sent it off to, it's called the Department of Legislative Services that does the drafting of the bills. Legislator can send either the full text of what they want to do, or they can send their ideas and then they'll draft it for them, which is pretty cool to see that process. But you want to make sure they get it to them by those dates. So March 17th for this session is the opposite chamber crossover day that I was just describing. If your bill doesn't cross over on that day, then it's dead and you'll have to try again the next year. April 7th is sine die. That's the date that if it hasn't gone through, it needs to go through both chambers and get those final votes that I was talking about to get to the governor's desk. Now, one thing that I didn't share was that the governor has the option to veto a bill. So let's say the governor gets a bill, he doesn't like it, he doesn't think it's good policy, and he vetoes it. The legislature can come back for what's called a special session, where they come back after the 90 days to override the governor's veto. What they need to do that is they need 3/5 of both chambers voting in support of the bill for it to become law, to override the governor's veto. There are also times where the governor may decide not to sign a bill, either because it's not something he wants a signing ceremony for, or she, or they. Right now we have Governor Moore, so you'll hear me use he because I'm referring to Governor Moore. But there may be times where the governor says, I don't care about this issue enough to sign it into law and have my name on it, but I'm going to let it go through. And so he can allow bills to pass, to pass into law is what that's called, without signing them. We're allowed to do that under Maryland's Constitution. All of these rules, except for these specific dates, they're in Maryland's Constitution that I described before. So let's go and do a brief overview on how to navigate Maryland's General Assembly website. So I'm going to click on this. I don't know. I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen, click on it, and then I'll start sharing my screen again. But while I'm pulling that up, David, was there anything that I missed that you wanted to add?
I don't have a whole lot to add. Just if there's one big takeaway from this, it's that there's a whole lot happening in a 90-day session. But everything that's going on means that we have multiple opportunities to intervene and have our voice heard. So for each time, we have a lot of opportunities to educate the legislature. And some of our bills, well, we'll talk a little bit more about the Community Health Worker Appreciation Day bill. So when we're going through this process, it's a win for us just to get to talk to the legislature and be part of the process. Whether the bill passes or not, we get an opportunity to get in front of lawmakers and educate them about an issue and say, community health workers are great, and maybe this isn't the year for that bill, but we can reintroduce it next year. And especially for like a big piece of policy like Medicaid reimbursement, you might have to go through this process several times and do a little bit better each year and build a little bit more support. So win or lose, getting involved and having your issue heard is an important part of this process.
Yes, absolutely. And just so folks know, just on average in Maryland, the average time that it takes for a bill to pass and become law is typically 3 tries. So that's 3 years. Sometimes bills make it sooner than that. Sometimes it takes longer than that, but that's about the average. So don't ever be discouraged if your bill that you're really passionate about doesn't pass on its first or even second try. 3 years is usually when something will get through. There are some issues that in Maryland, just because of, for a variety of reasons, especially if it's something that might be seen as more controversial or not a priority in our state, where it might just not pass for a very long time or ever. And it really just depends. So this is the Maryland General Assembly website. This is the landing page. This is in this carousel right here. They're going to have key information for you. So there was a fiscal briefing going on right now where we're talking about Maryland's budget. We're in a really severe budget deficit, very large, $3.7 billion. And the governor just recently proposed some pretty high budget cuts. I think around $2.5 billion in budget cuts across different spending that the state does to try to give us a balanced budget, because the Constitution requires that we have a balanced budget. So that's what this is about. The dates that I just described to you all, the session dates of interest, they actually have a document here. And when you click on something here, you're going to click on it on the actual carousel window. But there's a nifty calendar with all the dates that you need to know. And you can use these kind of as a guide for like deadlines by when things need to happen. So I'm going to go back to the home page. If you scroll down here, you can see when the House and Senate are on the floor talking about bills, having debates, their floor hearings. and it'll tell you when they're adjourned right now. So they're going to be going back in on Thursday, the 23rd at 10 a.m. And if you click on the link here when they're live, you can watch it. A lot of this process is live streamed now as a result of the pandemic. The General Assembly invested in a lot of technology to be able to make hearings virtual, be able to give people the opportunity to testify virtually, and to be able to watch what's going on the House and Senate floor. There's also a list here of bills that have been introduced. So if you click on these, so let's click on Senate bills introduced. This shows us all of the bills that have been introduced in the Senate. You can see we've got 468 bills already that have been introduced. That's big, but typically, since the pandemic, we usually hit around 3,000 bills total that get introduced. A lot of those are going to be cross files where it's the same bill being counted twice, but that's just to give you kind of a gauge for how much work is being done during the session and how much time folks put in on advocating on issues that they really care about. So the cool thing about looking at this list is you can actually filter it where you can look for specific subject areas that might be flagged in the title of the bill. So I'm going to do this for the doulas. So let's say you want to find things. So you could type in the word doula. You might not find anything with that. You can also type in maybe the word reproductive. All right, so this last one is not relevant because it's about cars, but this first one, legally protected healthcare, IVF Contraception Shield Act of 2025. So if you want to know more about this, you would click on the bill number that's in blue, and you can see the synopsis of what the bill does. So what this one would do, so I do want to put this on the doula's radar, and other folks that are interested in repro health and justice advocacy. This bill would change Maryland's definition of legally protected healthcare. So what that means is we have different kinds of healthcare categories where our state will not share information with another state or will not comply with another state that's trying to prosecute someone for seeking certain healthcare services in Maryland. So in Maryland, we've shielded reproductive healthcare, so abortion care in particular. We don't comply with other states if they're trying to prosecute someone for seeking abortion care in Maryland, including physicians that provide the care and people who are transporting someone or supporting them to get that care. So what this would do is add under that same umbrella, reproductive fertility preservation, contraceptive treatment, including medications. And if you want to know the actual bill text, you would click up here is where the bill text is going to be. As soon as it's available, that'll turn blue. So this is the actual text of the bill. I'm not going to go through all of this. I just wanted to let y'all know that it will be here on the page for the bill. So I'm going to do a quick run through of one for the community health workers. Okay, so let's look at House bills. All right, so say you want to find something about community health workers. You type in community. Okay, so we've got some stuff that looks like it's relevant. I do see one that says community health worker. Let's be more specific and type in community health worker. Okay, so this is the bill that David was talking about. David, did you want to share what this bill does?
Yeah, so this is the second year that this bill has been introduced. This bill would require the governor to proclaim May 8th as Community Health Worker Appreciation Day, which is our way of helping to recognize and promote community health workers, because we know from hearing from them that a lack of recognition and respect in the profession is often an issue. But more than that, this was also a part of our strategy towards building towards Medicaid reimbursement. So like I mentioned earlier, win or lose, this is an opportunity to get in front of the legislature and talk about how great community health workers are. For each person that signed up to testify on this bill, we had an opportunity to say, you know, community health workers save $2.50 for every dollar that's spent on them to the healthcare system. They make amazing connections with their communities. They deal with social determinants of health. And this was an opportunity for us to get the idea of community health workers in the brains of legislatures so that we could come back the next year and build on that. So for a lot of the legislators that we were presenting to about this bill, they might not have heard anything about community health workers for a couple years since the licensing standards were passed. So putting forward a bill like this is not just an opportunity to recognize and appreciate community health workers. It's also part of our strategy to educate our legislators, have a chance to talk to them about this, and sort of raise the profile of community health workers. And that has that's helped us build towards this year to accomplish some bigger goals. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we continue through the presentation.
Okay, so just in the interest of our time together tonight, I want to make sure that we leave some time for question and answer. I'm going to go through one more that will be of interest, I think, to the doulas. So you can also search bills if you know the bill number. So I'm going to do that right now because I know the number for this one. Okay, well, let me think. It's either 170 or 175. Let's try 170 first. Yes, all right, I got it on the first try. So this is a bill that actually does impact doula Medicaid reimbursement. And you wouldn't know that from the title of it. So when you're searching for bills that, if you're interested in doula care, if you are a doula, if you are interested in reproductive health care, maternal, child, infant health, try those key search terms to pull up bills like this, because they might not have it in the title what it does. But I just want to show you. So this one, it's on a fund called the Maternal and Child Health Population Improvement Fund. Now, this was money that another agency gave to the Department of Health to do some pretty cool child and maternal health initiatives. But what isn't clear in this little synopsis, so I'm going to click on the bill. You should always read bill text to figure out, exactly what it does, because that synopsis doesn't always capture what it does. So like, for example, the synopsis just says they're extending how long the state will be able to use the funds. So the funds are supposed to expire in 2025, at the end of 2025, but they want to extend it to 2027. So you may ask, okay, why do they want to do that? What does this cover? So you read the text in here and you can see that this bill, so there was a commission, it was the Health Services Cost Review Commission that gave the state this money. And it tells you what's in the fund, how the fund works, and that they're extending the date. Now, the other thing you can do to get more information, like more nitty gritty about what this does, is click on under analysis, fiscal and policy note. Every bill is going to have one of those, and it usually pops up about 2 days or the day before the hearing. So if you read this analysis, I'm going to just for the interest of time, because I've already read it. If you read this analysis, you'll see that part of this pot of money, so the state was given $40 million by this agency. Part of this pot of money goes towards reimbursement for doula services. This was the money that actually created the Medicaid doula program. So right now we have about $21 million left in that fund, and the state has to spend it by December 2025. So this bill would allow them to hold on to that money and continue spending it until 2027. So we definitely want to encourage doulas in particular to weigh in on this and to support this, because if that money is not available to the state, they may not be able to continue funding any of these programs that were created with those funds, or expanded with those funds without cutting something else, or they might not be able to fund them at the level that they have been for the last few years. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen for this and go back to our presentation view. Oh, wait, hold on a second. Just going back to our presentation. Okay. David, did you want to cover, just so folks are aware for the, hold on, did you want to cover just real quick about the guides on the MGA website? The video guides that are available?
Helps if I'm on mute. So yeah, this is a lot to remember, and the website can be complicated. I say this as somebody that's generally very good at using websites. This one is not always intuitive. So you don't have to remember everything we've shared about the website today. They actually offer some pretty good video guides on how to use it. So when we distribute this PowerPoint, if you click on the second link that's here, you'll be able to go through video tutorials on how to use the website. And it's also something that you can contact us for help with. Even as folks that are doing this professionally, we rely a lot on our allies and on other organizations. It's a lot of work to monitor every bill that's dropping when there's thousands of pieces of legislation coming out. So it's key to know who your allies are and who you're working with so that you can hear more from other people. But yeah, there's trainings that are offered on the MGA website, and please always feel free to reach out to us if you want to get involved and you don't remember everything that we presented this evening.
And just so folks know, anything, any of the bills that we've talked about tonight, including ones that we didn't talk about that we have flagged as affecting community health workers, doulas, people in those spaces. At the end of this presentation, so probably tomorrow or the next day, when we send out the thank yous and this slide deck and the recording, we're also going to send a list of bills that might be of interest to you so that you can stay up to date on them. Right. So I know we've got about 12 minutes left, so we'll zoom through some of this a bit because we do want to have a little bit of time for question and answer. So this is on trying to identify and work with allies in the legislature, and specifically legislators. David, did you want to cover this one?
Yeah, so this is a very key part of the process, is knowing who your allies are in Congress, not in Congress, in the General Assembly. As we mentioned, only a legislator can introduce a new bill. So it's important to know who to work with. Like I mentioned, my number one tip for that is to ask around. Check in with your allies to ask what folks' experiences have been like with that legislator. You can Google legislators and understand the history of bills they've supported, but what you can't necessarily Google is like, does this person respond to emails in a timely fashion? What's the best way to approach them? What issues are they interested in? Do they flake on you when you've asked them to do something? So it's important to know who to work with. Paying attention to their party affiliation is also important. Like I mentioned, we can't do any electioneering here, but based on the party history, based on the affiliation with a particular political party, that might tell you a lot about how they would treat a particular piece of legislation. One key tip is to prioritize meetings with legislatures in the committee where your bill will be heard. The committee chair and members of the committee have extra influence on the process. So it's always good to have a relationship with somebody that can stay with the bill throughout the entire process and has more say in what happens to it. And finally, you can look on the MGA website for a legislator's bio to see if they have background on an issue or if they're interested in it. It's also very useful to search for legislation in the way that we just showed you and see whose name pops up on other doula-related bills or other community health worker-related bills. For example, we worked with Delegate Heather Bagnall on the Community Health Worker Appreciation Day bill. So that's somebody that we know has a background on this issue and has been supportive of us in the past. So knowing who to talk to is key. And you can do your own research, but there's no substitute for being in contact with folks that have relationships with legislators. It not only helps you to know who's good to talk to, but it also helps you get their ear if you know somebody who's connected and who they listen to.
Okay, so let's go to the next one. So elevator pitches. This is really key in legislative advocacy, is being able to deliver, what the problem is, what the solution is, and why you're proposing that solution, and asking a legislator to take a specific action in a short period of time. So I'm talking like, hallway conversations. A lot of advocates that stick around the General Assembly will kind of wait in the halls for legislators as they're going between meetings, or going from their committee meetings to the House or Senate floor, and just say, oh, Senator, so-and-so, can I just talk to you real quick about this bill? And the expectation from legislators is usually that when you say, when you're catching them walking, that you're going to be quick. So it's really key to distill your talking points to something that's bite-sized. So first, you want to introduce yourself, of course. So like for me, I'd say, hey, my name is Ashley Willard. I'm from Public Justice Center. And then you want to give a brief description of the problem along with some key facts about it, just a few, enough to leave them with a little bit of education on the issue. So Community Health Worker Appreciation Day bill, for example, you might say, we're working in a coalition of community health workers. The most important issues that they've raised to us that are barriers for them staying in the field are inadequate pay, lack of career advancement, and lack of recognition and respect in their field by care teams that they work with. And then you want to talk about what is the solution to the issue. Now, if you have a personal connection to the issue, you can tell legislators that. They always prefer to hear from people who are directly impacted or have lived experience, or people who are their constituents in particular. So you can use the MyMGA website to look and see whose district you live in, so you know which legislators to reach out to about the issues that you care about, because right, they need your vote in the future. So if I was going to describe, the bill, after saying that pitch about the issues that we're seeing and barriers to community health workers staying in their field, I would say, so HB 65, what it would do is it would require the governor to declare annually on May 8th, Community Health Worker Day. Why May 8th? Well, that's when the certification bill, the bill that created the community health worker certification, was signed into law. And then the last thing you do is make your ask. We really want you to vote in support of this. We really appreciate your support on this issue. Thank you so much. And then wrap it up from there. You want to know your audience, and David already talked about this. Choose your best spokesperson to meet with legislators. So if it's someone and you have a ally that lives in that person's district and is their constituent, maybe that should be the person who leads in the meeting, the talking points and the ask. All right. So let's talk a bit about written and oral testimony. So every committee, so what I described before for folks who are just joining, in the House and Senate, they have committees that work on specific issue areas and then take bills in that issue area. They schedule hearings. So every committee has its own rules for witness testimony. You need a MyMGA account to sign up to testify, and we put a link in this presentation when we send it out that you'll be able to click on with all the tutorial videos on how to create your account, how to track bills, how to sign up to testify. So read the witness guidelines that they have because they're specific for each committee, but generally they give you about 2 minutes to testify orally. So that's when you go up to this table that you see folks sitting at in this clip and you testify on the bill. You know your own story, so try not to read directly from the paper. You don't need to read something like, "Hi, my name is Ashley Willard. I'm from Public Justice Center." You know that. You know who you are. You also know your story and why you're there and why the issue is important. Over the years, there's one particular legislator, I don't think he's there anymore, but on one of the committees who used to say, "Speak from your heart," when he would start seeing people read. And I've heard other chairs of committees start saying that over time when they see folks that they don't normally see testifying on bills, like the advocates that are, the ones that are from organizations that are down there a lot, where they'll just say, "Speak from your heart." Person puts down the paper and they know it. They know what's on that paper. So have confidence in yourself. Last, stick to the time limit. If they give you 2 minutes, there's going to be a timer in front of you, and that can be a little bit jarring. But that timer is counting down and it's going to ding when the time is up. If you run out of time, you can ask the committee chair, "Can I just finish my sentence? Can I just finish that thought?" And they usually will give you a couple extra seconds, like maybe 10, 15 seconds to just wrap up what you were saying. But it's really important to be respectful of that time limit because they've got a lot of bills to hear and a lot of witnesses to hear. So do your best to stick to the 2 minutes, practice your testimony to try to get there. And also don't forget to ask them to vote favorably or unfavorably on the issue that you're working on. So this is just a list of key things that you want to include in your written testimony if you're going to submit written testimony. You would upload that on the MyMGA website. And so we have a list here of things that have to be on it so it gets where it needs to go. There's no page limit, but we usually recommend to folks keep it within 2 pages. Legislators are reading a lot of testimony, so the more you can condense, your key points and what you want to say, the more likely they're going to read the entire, all of your testimony and, absorb it. You can use bold, italicized, underline for impact. I do that a lot where if the first sentence is, stating a really key fact I want them to pay attention to, I might bold it so that I know that's where their attention is drawn. All right. And then David, did you want to do this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've gone over the process of getting your bill through the legislature and supporting it. We won't throw you into the deep end. If you do want to submit written or oral testimony, again, I can't stress this enough. Please reach out to us. We will help. We're not going to make you do it alone, or, we're going to make sure that you're competent and able to do it. So once you've done this and you're successful, you've got to get it through one chamber and then into the next. When your bill passes the House, it also needs to be passed by the Senate. Our Community Health Worker Appreciation Day bill, for example, passed the House last year. And it was in large part because we had a lot of people there to testify. We had a lot of written testimony submitted. There was a lot of clear support from the CHW community. That got us through the House. But we weren't quite as prepared for the Senate because we were using this as an educational opportunity. We didn't necessarily expect that the bill would pass, but it did because of that support. So we mentioned a few key dates earlier. It's important to pay attention to when your bill is scheduled for a hearing. We will share key dates with the coalitions that are relevant as they emerge. We're monitoring this closely, but keep those dates in mind because things move very quickly and things can happen. A lot can happen in just a few days. And so, yeah, staying connected to the coalition and paying attention to emails that we send is important. It's really a 90-day sprint. There's a lot going on and a lot to keep track of. But once you get it to the governor's desk, you have the opportunity to show up for a nice photo op. We have some of our doulas pictured after we passed some maternal health legislation last year. So victory feels really nice.
Yes. Yep. And you can frame your picture. You also get a nice commemorative pen that will have the governor's signature on it when you go to one of these bill signings. So they're really exciting. All right. So the last couple things that we'll cover. So I know that we're approaching the end of this, but what we're going to do is just keep things open for the next 5 to 10 minutes for folks that can stay on. So if you can stay on and you want to ask questions, we're happy to stay just for a little extra time to answer questions. So the power of social media, like David was saying, staying connected to those coalition circles, but also social media can be a great strategy to alert legislators to, your position, how you want them to vote, to encourage them to do something, to share key facts about something you're advocating for or against so that people pay attention to it. There is a risk of using social media, right? Anytime we put out a public statement, we got to be very careful what we're saying. So we recommend that if you're going to tag a legislator, be mindful about what you're saying, and because you want to be careful not to burn bridges. So if you want to point out that somebody voted in a way that you just completely disagree with, if you want to tag them, that's within your power. That is something you can do. Sometimes that's helpful. Sometimes it could burn a bridge for someone that might be an ally on another issue. So you just got to kind of weigh and balance the risks and rewards of using social media. All right, so what happens after the win? So David already talked about this a bit, but you get to take your picture with the governor. When your bill passes, he signs it into law right in front of you, and you get to take a picture, and you get that picture for free afterwards. They upload it to the governor's website, and you get a commemorative pen. So this was one of the Doula Alliance of Maryland's co-founders, Anna, and her son, Aiden, meeting with the governor, which is really, really exciting. So let's see. And then if you want to know what happens to the bill after it becomes law, pay attention. In the bill, it will usually say who's responsible for implementing it. So if it's something that affects the Department of Health, that's their responsibility to carry out their duties in the bill. You can reach out to them and connect and say, hey, what's your plan? Can I meet with you? What progress are you making? And see if there are opportunities for you to advocate to get even more in shaping the implementation process. And you can also connect with advocates that are doing the implementation work too. So that's the end of our presentation. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing, but I do want to open it up for question and answer from folks. For anybody that can still stay on, we're going to stay on for the next couple of minutes to listen to what you have to say. So I'm just looking in the chat. Can a bill be... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I will throw out, we will have a certificate of completion forthcoming for this for all the community health workers in the office. What I understand, this can count towards your professional development hours that you need for recertification. So make sure to reach out to us so that we have your email and we can help you meet your recertification requirements.
Yes.
Very important. Please recertify. I've just heard recently that we, we need a big effort towards that as well. So.
Yeah, there's a large number of community health workers that are up for recertification that have not done so yet. I think it's a little less than half, and half is a lot. So definitely do that. And like David said, connect with us if you would like a certificate of completion, and we'll get that drawn up and sent off to you. So I'm gonna look through the chat. Like I said, folks, drop your socials, drop your name, what you do for a living. If you want people to connect with you, if you want to be part of any of the particular coalitions that we talked about, like the CHW Empowerment Coalition of Maryland or the Doula Alliance of Maryland, or both, at PJC, we've got some other coalitions that might be of interest to you. So if there's a subject area that you're interested in that's not covered in one of those, reach out to us and we can help connect you to those spaces. All right, so I'm just scrolling through to see what kind of questions we have. I did see one that said, can a bill be revived if it dies? That's a great question. So no, it can't. So once a bill doesn't meet one of those deadlines that I talked about earlier, so the first deadline is it has to get out of committee and to the House or Senate floor, whichever chamber it's in, voted on, and out of there to go to the next chamber. If it doesn't make the deadline date, it's dead. There are some very tiny exceptions to that. The main exception is if a subcommittee is still working on a bill and they've already communicated to the other chamber, hey, the bill is coming. It's going to pass on the House floor. There's no issue. We just need to fine tune, this one word in the language. We're waiting on the on bill drafting to draft that language. So there are some tiny exceptions where I have seen bills where it's after the deadline, but they were still able to cross over because there was communication between the two chambers that the bill was coming. Those are it's a very narrow exception. Those deadlines are not in Maryland's constitution. So they're more like, I would consider them more like policies of the General Assembly, but they try to stick to them, and they usually do because we've got a 90-day session and a lot happens. Let me see if there's other questions we've got. But that was a great question. What are the requirements needed to start a bill? That's also a great question. So David, maybe we can tag team this. There aren't really requirements. We recommend that if you have an idea in mind for something that you want to change in Maryland, make better, add to an existing law, what you want to do is connect with a legislator that you think would be a good fit for that bill. So we already shared some tips and tricks on how to identify an ally, someone who you can really, kind of cultivate into a champion on the issue, or might already be a champion on the issue. So we recommend that folks start reaching out to legislators, I'd say summer, but probably once you reach October, you're starting to get into the holidays, and it's going to be harder to find a legislator that can take your bill and introduce it. The reason for that is because on the Senate side, for the last few years, so since the pandemic, they have bill caps. So they have a limit on the number of bills they can take. I think it's 30 each, I think. Mm. And so usually they're already planning in their mind, if a bill died, didn't pass, that they want to reintroduce, they might already have like 10 that they're planning to reintroduce. So you want to get to them early, talk to them, usually during the summer is the best time, and try to get to them before, around October, because once the holidays start, it's harder to connect. Let's see. And David, did you have anything you wanted to share on? And usually that's pretty much the only requirement, is you have to have a legislator introduce it. You can introduce something on really any topic as long as there's a legislator that's willing to put the issue forward. David, was there anything you wanted to share?
Not really. That's kind of all there is to it. It's normal to, I just want to inoculate people. If their bill doesn't get passed, first off, it's not abnormal. It's normal to have to introduce a bill several times, and every time you do, you can build on your success from the previous year and what you learned. And this has been key for us because we've learned a lot of lessons from doula Medicaid reimbursement that we are now applying to community health worker reimbursement. Or for a particular bill, if you've built a relationship with the legislature, they'll remember you, oh, I remember you last year, you talked about this bill and you made a joke and I laughed at it and whatever. Try every year you do a little better, and you can build on your previous year. So losing is not really a loss. You got to go into this. Sometimes you go into this knowing that your bill isn't going to pass this year, but it's still worth pursuing because you get the opportunity to lay the groundwork for future years.
Yes, yes, exactly. And I can tell you, David and I collectively as a team at PJC have been working on legislative advocacy for many years. Like we're working on a bill this year. It's the bill's third year. And we think it's probably not going to pass this year either. It depends. It depends. There's a lot of barriers in the way of this particular one getting passed. But that's how legislative advocacy goes, and you learn so many lessons along the way. So things that we learned in our second year of this particular bill, we're carrying into the third year to be like, okay, that didn't work last year, so what do we need to do for the third year? And now we've done those things. We feel like we've got a better shot at getting it passed, but this budget deficit makes things so hard to get through that cost money. So we'll see what happens, but if it doesn't pass, we're going to be back in the fourth year. And that's a good segue to this next question. Are you able to try again next year if the bill dies? Thank you for asking that question, Muriel. Yes, you can. So a bill can be reintroduced. Really, there's an unlimited number of times a bill can be reintroduced. There's, there are times where a bill may never pass just because Maryland might not be a state where our majority, we have a majority Democratic legislature, but it might be an issue that just we have not as a state decided we want to do. So a good example of that would be Medicare for all. We have not, there's a bill that's usually introduced every year on Medicare for all and universal health care. I think there's two that usually get introduced. The legislators know that those aren't going to pass because Maryland is in a state where we've committed to doing that and where we've decided we're going to change our healthcare system in that way. And I have feels about that, but that said, those legislators continue to introduce that bill each year because the issue is very important to them. They want to keep the conversation going and keep the issue alive. So yes, you can reintroduce a bill even if it dies in the previous year. Let's see.
Introduce it better as well. You'll also learn who opposes it and what types of arguments they might make. So typically, if you reintroduce a bill, you can anticipate the resistance and you can learn from what happened last time and do better.
Yeah. Yes. So I don't see this question in the chat, but I'm going to ask this question. How do I know if I should support a bill or oppose it? We didn't cover that in this training, but I just want to touch on it briefly. So there are times where bills can have really misleading titles. I don't, mixed opinions. Sometimes it might be intentional to try to get something to fly under the radar. So for my doulas on the line, you might see something titled, something like Protecting Our Children Act. That sounds lovely. We all want to protect kids, right? Kids are great. And then you read it and it might be something that defunds abortion care entirely in Maryland. And so, and you might see that the bill sponsor is part of a party that traditionally has aligned with that view. And so that's a key to you that, okay, that's a bill that, the title doesn't really match what it's saying it does, depending on what your political leanings are, right? And so you can oppose bills too. We talked today about supporting bills, but you can oppose them. You can also support bills and ask for an amendment. So if you like a bill otherwise, but you think something needs a change in it, then you can put that forward too for the committee to consider. But I just wanted to flag that for people that sometimes bills can have titles that don't necessarily match. You can also ask other advocates, hey, are you weighing in on this? What's your plan? Like, what's your position? Or is this a bill I need to put my energy in on? And they might tell you, oh girl, that bill has been introduced like 5 years in a row. It's not going anywhere. If you need to pick and choose between two to support this one, this is the one that advocates are getting behind this year. So keeping that, in mind. And if ever you have a question about a bill you see, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to, dig up information for you, review it and let you know what it's about and, connect you to advocates that are working on that bill. I see we've got 3 new messages.
Yeah, there's one question in the chat that I would love to take a second to answer, which is, are there any future events coming up? And the answer is yes, absolutely. Thank you for asking. A key, as we've said, public support and showing that the community is engaged is a key part of getting this legislation over the finish line. So last year, we held a community health worker appreciation rally in Annapolis. It was on March 15th, which, if you remember the date with the slide with the dates, is 2 days before crossover day. So we got lucky. We were in the right place at the right time. And as we were out there having community health workers talk about the value of the work and why it's important and why we should support it, the legislators were heading from one chamber to the other and they were walking past. So we were there in Annapolis in front of the legislature with this rally and all of our signs and all of our wonderful speeches raising the profile of community health workers. So we can engage in social media. We meet with legislators all the time, but probably the most effective form of advocacy is showing up in person and talking to people face to face. So on February 27th, the Community Health Worker Coalition is going to be holding that rally again. We meet on the third Wednesday of every month as a coalition, and we also we meet on the third Wednesday of the month as a coalition, and we meet every Thursday to plan the rally. So if you want to be involved in planning that rally or know what's going on, or especially if you're a community health worker that's willing to tell your story, we would love to have you. I can work with you one-on-one to develop a speech, figure out the best way to share your experience. So if you haven't spoken in public before and the idea makes you nervous, me too. So we can work through it together and make sure that you're prepared. But yeah, please mark the evening of the 27th at 6 p.m. For the Community Health Worker Rally, because we need you there. That's how we're going to make this happen, is by doing it together. Individually, we can be ignored, but when we show up as a crowd with signs, we cannot be ignored.
Exactly. And I just dropped links for both coalitions in the chat. Just a disclaimer, the CHW website, the Empowerment Coalition website, is still kind of under construction. We're trying to figure out what the best layout for the kind of group we are and the kind of information we have is. But you can still peruse that website. David and I have our contact information on there. You can actually text us on our direct numbers at PJC, and those numbers are on the website. You can also email us and to connect. But otherwise, before we wrap this up, I'm just looking in the chat to see if we have any other questions. I think we got them all.
Please do share your email. Oh, Muriel, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was trying to type it, but
no, it's okay.
I'm slow with that. I just wanted to ask a question. I noticed when we do election on those bills that are being passed, is this in the same aspect, or is this what I'm asking is that it make it to the floor? Both parties have agreed, okay, they're going to go forward with this bill, this amendment to a bill, and we're voting on it. The reason I ask, because a lot of people don't take time to read those questions or read the amendment or the bill, and they just check the box and they're not sure. And then when something happens that affects the community, they're flabbergasted that this has happened when they didn't take the time to actually be well informed on what was being presented. Like, I go over things before I go to even vote. Yeah. So I'm well aware of what's in front of me. So with that, is this something that the governor passes? Has it already went there and then we're just asking for votes? Or is this to see what the community thinks and then it goes to the government to be passed?
Yeah. So I think I think I got what you're saying. I think you're asking about what are called ballot initiatives.
Right.
It depends. So this isn't because our organization, we don't do what's called electioneering. So we can't endorse candidates or we don't organize around ballot initiatives. So the knowledge I have on it is pretty slim, but what I can tell you is I have seen times where there's been legislation to have something go to a ballot initiative. So for example, there was a bill a couple years ago to put on the ballot. I think one was on legalization of recreational use of marijuana. So that did end up on the ballot. There was another another piece of legislation to put whether or not to add to Maryland's Constitution amendment for reproductive freedom. And so I believe that did end up on the ballot. And so there are ways legislators can put forward bills to change Maryland's constitution, or, there's also local initiatives as well that you can vote on. And so I would love to, if there are folks that are more interested as well in political advocacy, although it's not something we do, we can connect you to organizations that do that kind of advocacy and that may actually have their own trainings on how to get involved in the political side of things.
I think I may have confused. I really was just basically trying to find out if this was something that, let's say with community healthcare workers, because it's something that is underrated and so well needed. I was just wondering if it could have that same, not the same, because I know you said in the beginning, we don't do political, but is there some kind of stage that getting more information out and not just being inside of our hub, our community within itself, getting the public to really understand who we are and what we do as people. Because it was only in the people that we serve, people that don't even know that they need it, just like they didn't know they needed help with their water bill until the water bill got too high and they needed assistance. I'm just thinking of how can we be proactive in who we are, because that's what we do. With the most tools and the most information, it's us. We are the biggest tool that we have. And getting the resources. So the knowledge that I had that I can share with someone and each one reach one to each one, however you want to put it, to widen that scope. That's what I'm asking. Basically, how can we make this where people will we don't have to demand it because more know about it and understand what it is to actually work with us and why we're so needed in this community, especially now.
Yes,
so,
yes. So I apologize. So I did misunderstand, but I appreciate you clarifying. David, did you want to talk more about kind of how the coalition has been doing that with community health workers?
Yeah, I'd love to. So that's one of the big goals in advancing the Community Health Worker Day Appreciation Bill, is that gives so whenever you introduce a bill, and this is important to know just in general about our political system, but getting the bill passed is not the only reason people introduce a bill. Sometimes you might introduce a bill just because it gives you the opportunity to talk to legislatures and educate them. So when you sign up to testify, everybody gets 2 minutes to tell all the legislators, this is why community health workers are important. So my first time testifying in person was on that bill last year. And I used some of the words that I've heard from community health workers. Stephanie Brown, who was one of our speakers at the rally, said that, it's not the doctor's job to make sure that your lights are on and you got food in the fridge and everything and all that stuff. That's the community health worker's job. So that's what I shared in my testimony. And, I got a lot of nods and approval. And maybe those legislators didn't know what community health workers were or why they're important or anything. The reason that we do want that bill passed, we do want to have the Appreciation Day and recognize this important work. So don't get me wrong, we want to win. But the real prize there was exactly what you're talking about, bringing together this community and educating our legislation on why they should be passing bills and supporting this work.
I appreciate all of your hard work because I'm also a peer recovery specialist.
Oh, great.
And I've done that part of going to the legislature. That's why I said the elevator. Getting that few minutes to say your name, say what you gotta say, and get in there and get out. We practice that through that. Great. Yet I do think that it would be the community healthcare worker is just starting. It's like a peak under the peer, and they're both equally needed.
Yes.
But I do think having that dual training gives you just another window to look in, and it's another community to connect to because we basically do some of the same things. One is with the recovery, one is just the whole embrace of the community. Yeah. So I just think if you're embracing the whole community, I just think a little more recognition is needed for us. That's all.
Yes. Yeah. And Muriel, I just wanted to ask if you haven't dropped your email.
I did my email.
Okay, we're gonna pull it because I'm like, we want you to join our coalition, but also, for everybody on here, this is what we're talking about. See, Muriel just engaged in just that natural, bent towards advocacy that y'all have, and just explaining how important your professions are. And, you know, you can do it through bill hearings. You can do it through meeting with legislators one-on-one. We frequently arrange those meetings and to share with legislators, to tell them about the bill, ask them to vote yes. And we're going to be doing that on the Community Health Worker Appreciation Day bill. And we really, you know, David and I, we're not community health workers, but we're trying to, you know, use some of the tools that we have access to, and some of the connections, like networks that we have, to be able to ensure that we can help community health workers that want to engage in this advocacy get in front of the right people and feel confident when they're in front of those people that, you know, that they're doing the legislative advocacy piece. And so we'll be arranging those meetings soon on the Community Health Worker Day bill to meet with legislators. So we'd love to have folks join us for those. We can circulate that to this, you know, this email list that we're growing. And if you want to get involved in those or other bills, let us know. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. But before we end, I just want to say y'all both are definitely community healthcare workers, because that's what we do. We navigate, we support, and we connect.
Oh,
that's what it
thank
is.
you.
But I want to thank you both.
I appreciate it.
This is exactly why I'm so excited to work with community health workers and doulas, because you all are natural advocates. You already do this every day for your clients and your communities, and we just want to harness a little bit of that power and bring it to the legislature.
Yeah,
absolutely. I'm here for it.
You always leave us with a smile too. I see both of us are smiling very big. We love being in these spaces. I know we're over, but I appreciate, you know, folks who, everyone who was on this presentation, but also folks who wanted to stay on the line to ask more questions. Thank you so, so much for your time. Thanks for letting us present to you. And also, you know, connect with us. We want to hear from you. We want to help you with navigating the legislative process. If there are bills you're interested in, we can help you get involved in them and figure out how to get in front of the right people to share your stories. So you've got our contact info. You have the coalition websites. You know how to join and get involved. We can get you on those listservs and connected to those meetings.
Yep. And if you put your email in the chat, I'm going to reach out to each and every single person and make sure we're connected to the right coalition.
I was going to ask that question. Thank you, David.
But I'll be reaching out to everybody.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night. Stay warm. It's cold out there. And I know, you know, some people are also having issues with keeping their places heated. I hope that's nobody on this line, but if it is, holding you in warmth, and just have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful rest of your night. It's dark outside. It's been a long day. Have a wonderful rest of your night. Stay warm, folks.
Good night. Thanks.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.